I'm Jordan Hadfield. This is Faster Film Critic. Today on the show, we discuss Queer with Chase Fugel and special guest Dawson Thomas. Queer is a 2024 romantic drama directed by Luca Guadagnino, starring Daniel Craig, Drew Starkey, and Jason Schwartzman. I'm positive this is the side of James Bond you ain't ever seen before. Get in, we're going cinephiling. Dawson, thank you for joining us. We are really excited to have you.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we were just talking about the Sundance Film Festival coming up in 2025. I know you're really excited about it.
True. I am so stoked. I love Sundance. I've gone the past 2 years now, so this will be my third year. So I'm so excited.
How many films do you hope to see this time?
As many as I can, probably at least 20 to 25. If you include shorts, probably like 30 plus.
Super jealous, man. That's cool.
I'm so jealous.
That's cool. Well, I'm excited to talk about those movies with you, but today we're talking Queer.
So true. I'm excited as well.
I want to ask this question. This movie got a very limited release. It's got a very narrow scope. Why is it that you wanted to see this film?
I was really excited to see Daniel Craig. He's kind of this stereotypically masculine actor from what we've seen before, playing this flamboyant role in a film called Queer as the main homosexual character. I mean, that was just enough to interest me. I love Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. When they do scores for movies, it's always great. Luca Guadagnino has a great filmography, and I couldn't have been more excited to see this.
Kind of echoing that, I feel like, I don't know, it was a really good cast. I really like Daniel Craig. Like you said, he's in really traditional male roles. Same with Drew Starkey. The only thing I've seen him in is Outer Banks, but once again, he's a very macho, kind of gets the girl energy to him. So it was really exciting to see what they would bring to the film, if they would be different, if they would kind of fit the mold they have been in the past. And similarly, I love Challengers this year, and I love Call Me By Your Name, but for very different reasons. And so I was interested to see what reasons I would like or dislike this film going into it.
I was interested in this film. Chase, it was you that really got me the most interested in just talking about it. But number one, it's A24. And A24 has proven themselves to be a fantastic production company.
Amen.
Love A24, so that alone has got my attention. Then it's got Luca Guadagnino, Daniel Craig, Atticus Ross, Trent Reznor, some of my favorite composers in film today. They're absolutely fantastic. But what excited me most about this film, I love films that show a human perspective different than my own.
Yeah.
And so I was really excited to go in and see a film about William Lee, who is a gay man working in Mexico in the 1950s. I expected a love story. That's not exactly what I got, and we're going to talk about that more in a minute. But I was really excited to see his story, his journey. That's what drew me to the film. I was hoping to connect with this character who has a different experience than I do, has a different point of view than I do, has a different sexual orientation than I do, and I was really looking forward to that. That's what drew me into the movie the most.
So do you guys feel like you connected with him?
Very little.
Very little.
I'm going to say no. I would say Daniel Craig's character was probably the hardest thing for me in this film. And I think it's intentional, right? Like, as you watch it, I think Daniel's character shows some of the worst sides of like queer culture and that like otherness side of queer culture a lot. And so I think it was intentional, but still I wanted to go into it really connecting to this character. Wow, like this powerful story. And instead I was like just icked out by him the whole time, being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this guy.
That's unfortunate.
I don't know that I felt quite as negatively about Daniel Craig's character as you're describing, but I definitely did not connect with him. And it wasn't just because of the sexual preference. It was who he was and what he was trying to do, and almost everything about him I struggled to connect with.
Really?
Yeah.
I was surprised by how much I was able to connect with him at the end.
Really?
Yeah. I think that idea of falling in love with not the person themselves, but this idealistic version of them that doesn't actually exist. I've experienced it. And I think today with social media and online dating and all of that, it's more common than ever. These people are falling in love with people that don't actually exist.
So you understood Eugene Allerton, who is the individual William Lee was chasing through the movie. Daniel Craig, William Lee. Drew Starkey played Eugene Allerton. You understood William's perception of Eugene to be unrealistic?
Yes. I mean, of course he's justified in his perception of this character. He's kind of having this sexual crisis or exploration, trying to figure out who he is, like his own identity. And once he kind of comes to terms with not actually being a gay man, after the crazy ayahuasca journey that they have together, Daniel Craig is still in love with this guy.
Watching the movie and going through it, to me, it almost seemed like Drew Starkey's character had been maybe experimenting with guys, not really sure where he falls. You see him kind of going on dates with this girl throughout the movie, but you see him reaching out to these, older queer people in Mexico, being like, hey, will you take me to this party? Hey, will you introduce me to these people? And so for me, at least what I gathered like at the end of the film is after spending so much time with Daniel Craig's character and seeing him go through all these terrible things, whether it's addiction, whether it's obsession, this idea that he's not like other gay people, that he's just disembodied, he's not queer. To me, it almost made me feel like at the end of the movie, whether Drew really is gay or bi or whatever, he decides, I can't be a part of this community. I'm going to turn that off completely because I see what it turns people into. And so I'm going to deny that part of myself just because I can't let myself turn into Lee.
Okay.
That's a really interesting perspective. I didn't even think about Eugene's character throughout the film. I was so focused on Daniel Craig. I mean, there were moments where I thought about Eugene. Where does he fall in this relationship with William? Where does he fall with this relationship with this woman? But as far as where his journey took him through the end of the film, that didn't even cross my mind. So that's a really interesting point. Can we do this, guys? This film has 3 chapters. Can we talk chapter by chapter? Because these chapters are different.
Let's do that, yeah.
So chapter 1 takes place in Mexico. This is where William meets Eugene for the first time, and there's a relationship building between the two of them. What were you guys thinking, feeling, observing, interpreting through chapter 1?
I actually really enjoyed chapter 1. And it didn't use this traditional kind of hook. It was more just a compilation of scenes from William Lee's life. And as he starts interacting with this character of Eugene, just these minor glimpses and everything. I thought it was fun, playful, and you're trying to figure out whether Eugene is homosexual or just friendly and presents kind of flamboyant. I thought it was fun.
I also really liked part 1. I think it was a lighter tone than the rest of the movie for sure.
Absolutely.
Because going into it thinking that it's going to be a romance movie, right? You start to see their relationship bloom. You see them, they're starting to go out. You see William's character tell people, yeah, never bring them to your house. Don't introduce them to like your personal life, right? Like keep it very separate. But the very first night that they both hang out together, William invites him back to his own house, not a hotel this time. And so I think watching this scene play out, you see this character who's very flawed. He has a lot going on, but is genuinely trying to develop a relationship with this other person. And you see Eugene at least be interested in that and wanting to explore that and see what happens. And so I thought that part at least was very interesting because I thought here's like a romance developing. Here's maybe a relationship starting to appear.
I really liked chapter 1, but it was for very different reasons than I expected. Chapter 1 is so artful.
Yeah.
A lot of the cinematography is absolutely fantastic. The color palette that Luca uses through the first chapter is amazing. The music. Guys, the music through this whole film.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. The music in this film is absolutely amazing. It starts with All Apologies, written by Nirvana, but sung by Sinead O'Connor.
Such an amazing needle drop.
As soon as the opening credits kind of ended, the opening segment where this song is playing, I was like, oh my goodness, we are in for a treat here.
Yeah.
Cinematically, the film, especially chapter 1, is absolutely incredible.
I was a little bit disappointed. I thought the sets felt a little empty. They felt a little bare to me. And then there was a lot of use of green screen throughout this film. Some of it was
a lot of models.
Yeah.
They use a lot of miniatures.
There was a lot of miniature models, green screens to kind of widen the scope of this film.
Yes.
But I was a little disappointed that the sets looked a little bit empty.
So I know you want to rag on the sets, but I have got to come back to the music.
Okay.
The music was so good in this first chapter.
The music was really good. I was excited going into it for the music, just knowing that they had already collaborated together on Challengers. This is totally different than Challengers music-wise, but still interesting, something that I feel like you don't hear all the time. I felt like each song really related to like whatever part of the story you were at.
There's one scene where William Lee is leaving a night that he had spent with a prostitute, a male prostitute, and he's walking through the street. And all of a sudden, Come As You Are comes on by Nirvana. And it was jarring. I was like, what is this song doing in this film at this moment? And after about 15 seconds, it hit me. And I thought, this is the most perfect song for this moment. And I just thought it was so unique and creative and so cool. It fit the emotion that was trying to be portrayed in this moment. The atmosphere. It was just perfect.
Yeah.
Totally.
All the way through the first chapter, the music was amazing. Cinematography was amazing. The narrative, though, again, guys, I was expecting a love story. And answer me this. Was William Lee looking for love, or was he looking to find passion?
I don't think he was looking for love. I think, unfortunately, it's being like a member of the queer community. It's not like just me talking about like a group I don't know. But there is that like stereotype of like the old man kind of creeper, kind of preying on younger men. And so I think watching this movie and watching him on the screen, instantly I was a little bit taken aback because he is like every early 20-year-old gay guy's nightmare kind of this creeper who sits at the bar and he thinks he's hot stuff. And so instantly I was like, oh, actually, this guy is kind of freaking me out.
I could see that. I could see it being a little creepy.
And I felt that. And that's just not what I was expecting. I thought this was a movie where he was looking for love, and that didn't happen in the first chapter.
To me, it made sense. This older guy, single, 1950s Mexico, where his emotions and stuff are so suppressed, at least in public, in society. And so he's on this search for connection wherever he can get it.
1,000,000%. And I think that's why Eugene throws him off his game so much, is because you see Eugene and he doesn't need validation from anyone, right? When he talks to someone because he wants to, right? He goes up to the old guy, not because he's into him. He just wants to go to a party. He's interested in that. And so I think when he starts going out with Daniel Craig's character, it's surprising to Daniel Craig because suddenly it's not this, we go out one night, we hook up, see you later, we won't connect again, whatever. It's Drew Starkey's character, Eugene, is really looking for someone. He's looking to build a connection. And I think that is what makes William not be able to move on from him in the future, is because he's never pursued that or had that. And so he's had that one experience of someone not just wanting him for a night or to be validated. He's wanting to like build something with someone. And I think he just can't ever move on from that feeling.
You know, I said that I was focused on William's character throughout the whole film. I think the whole film is focused on William's character. And as you were talking, Dawson, I realized Eugene barely speaks through this film. Like, he's quiet.
Yeah.
You are always wondering what he's thinking, and you're not listening to what he's saying because he's not saying anything.
And it's funny because he presents like flamboyant and
at times, yeah.
what you would assume a homosexual man, but that quiet kind of stoic personality is so masculine. I mean, typically you don't see these two things paired together, but I love that this film could do both. It could pair homosexuality with masculinity, and they'd fit perfectly.
So do you think that Eugene was feeling sorry for William? Do you think he had a little bit of interest in William for a short time? What was his motivations in this relationship?
I think he was interested just at first, right? It's very clear right as they start talking that Eugene's never had much experience in the queer community at all. He says he's never gone to the clubs in the United States. This is really his first encounter, maybe trying something that he never has before. And so I think at the very beginning, he is genuinely interested. And I think that first scene when they're at William's house plays a lot differently than some of the like sex scenes in Act 2, right? Those are very rigid. You can tell Eugene is not having a good time. Like, it's very contract. Whereas that very first one that night is totally different. It's set up differently. And so I think at first he was interested, but I think he went out for a minute, was like, hey, this guy's kind of a loser, and just wanted to just move on.
And it just didn't work. There just wasn't the magic there that he was looking for. But it was there for William for sure. Let's move into Act 2. In Act 2, William convinces Eugene to go with him on a trip. And it is during this experience that the movie really takes a turn.
Yeah.
It starts to focus on William's drug addiction. He's addicted to heroin. And by the way, there's a scene where William shoots up. He's in his apartment by himself. And it is one of the most sad scenes in the whole movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Here he is shooting up heroin, immediately follows it with a cigarette, and then starts drinking whiskey. I mean, this guy is clearly in pain. He is clearly lonely, and he's clearly doing everything he can to numb that pain as much as possible.
And the scene is long. It lingers. It's not like those all happen quickly right after each other. He takes time setting up the heroin, injecting it. You watch it and feel it every second.
Really moving scene. Beautifully shot. Very impactful. One of the more impactful scenes in the entire film, in my opinion. Their relationship begins to really struggle in Act 2. How did Act 2 work for you?
That's a good question. I think Act 2 for me worked less. As soon as the scene started with him doing heroin, I think things started to click for me right away. That the movie's turning and it's not going back to maybe what I had thought it would start with or anything like that, because that scene is so methodical. It's not his first time doing this. He's instantly put at ease. The most ease you've seen him in the entire movie is right after he shoots up heroin, smokes a cigarette, and then drinks a bunch. And that's like the most you'll ever see him at ease the whole movie. It threw me off, but I knew more of what I was going to expect for the rest of the movie, but I was a little bit like, oh, this is definitely not going how I thought it was going to go at all.
I actually really enjoyed Chapter 2, but it was definitely going in a different direction. It was going in a direction I did not expect, and I don't know that I liked Chapter 2 with Chapter 1.
Agree.
Okay.
If Chapter 1 was different, Chapter 2 really worked for me. But I could tell, wait a second, we're going in a different place. The point that I thought the film was making in Chapter 1 was not the point the film was trying to make in Chapter 2. And I found myself thinking, where are we going? Like, what is this movie trying to communicate? Mm-hmm. And that's not a bad thing. But at this point in the film, that's what I was thinking, is what's happening now? We've got a narrative shift. What am I supposed to be gaining from this film? Yeah. What am I supposed to be learning from this film? What am I supposed to be feeling from this film? That's kind of where Chapter 2 went for me.
As soon as they got on that bus, I was surprised. I wasn't expecting them to leave that setting in Mexico, but I actually like where the film went.
Act 2 is the one I found myself maybe the most bored in. I think Act 1, I'm following the story. I'm like, okay, this guy is kind of a creeper. He has a lot going on. But then as it pivots so much towards him and his struggles, I found myself being like, okay, we're in another town. Okay, what's the point? Just because it just didn't connect at all for me.
Act 3, guys, this was a completely different movie.
Yeah.
We pivoted again.
Even more dramatic than the second.
Yeah, literally.
And yet Act 3 was my favorite.
Really?
But not as it sits in the movie.
Okay.
I want to see Act 3 as a standalone film. And by the way, I also want to see Act 1 as a standalone film.
So you just want to get rid of the whole Act 2 completely?
Well,
I mean, of course the story wouldn't work, but for entertainment purposes.
It's not that I want to get rid of Chapter 2 in the movie as it stands, but Chapter 2 just feels like a transition piece between Chapter 1 and Chapter 3.
Okay.
There's nothing in Chapter 2 that I really found interesting, and yet there was plenty of interest in Chapter 1 and Chapter 3. I wanted to see William in Chapter 1 in that setting. I want to see the rest of that story, and I didn't get it. Likewise, I feel like there's more to the story in Chapter 3, and I didn't get enough of that either.
One note I took for the movie is I was like, the general plot is really interesting to me. The cinematography is beautiful. The music is beautiful. It just, like, the details of the story just didn't connect for me. The idea of it, the premise of it works, and I think that could be really interesting to explore, but just the execution of it just lacked for me. Like, I just didn't enjoy it. Like you said, like Act 3, I could totally watch something like that. I thought the different dreams worked, and it was like an interesting idea. But after I had already sat through the first two and then it's pivoted again, I just was like, I can't. It was more fun to reflect on it than it was to watch it, which I don't know.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, it was more fun
That's,
like after
I'd
to
agree
talk
too.
to people and be like, oh, like, what did you think here? Than it was to like sit through it.
It's funny because Chase and I left the theater and we were like, do we even want a podcast on Queer? And Chase was like, well, let's sleep on it. And the next day we were both like, there's a lot to talk about here, but it had to sit with us a little while. This film is one that you definitely think about. Also in Chapter 3, we get to meet Dr. Cotter, and she's played by Leslie Manville. She, to me, was the most interesting character in the film.
She was really cool.
Granted, the snake scene is really stupid.
Yeah, the
CGI
effects.
snake,
The security guard snake?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Guard snake. Good clarification, Dawson. Lots of snakes in this film. I'm talking about the CGI snake.
So true.
But Dr. Cotter, I was really interested in. What is this lady's story? She's out here in the middle of the Ecuadorian jungle growing this hallucinogen, growing this ayahuasca that's incredibly powerful that, of course, William is dying to get his hands on. She looked like she's got some miles on her. You know what I mean?
That's one way to put it.
I'm very curious on what her story was. And
you'd have liked to know more of that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I would have liked Act 3 to have been a little bit longer, maybe its own film. But the drug scene, they finally convinced Dr. Cotter to provide them with some ayahuasca. And the trip scene where they're tripping was so cool.
Yeah.
It was weird. Man, it was artful. The way that they're in each other's skin, and I was just like, whoa, this is a very interesting way to portray a heavy drug trip.
And at first, right after they drink the tea and they're doing that ritual, and you can see that they're kind of out of it a little bit, and then it goes off the rails. It was entertaining. It didn't lose me, but it was surreal for sure.
So my understanding, you guys, right? You like Chapter 1 the best, Chapter 2 second best, and Chapter 3 the worst?
I would say first, Chapter 1, Chapter 3, Chapter 2 for me.
You and I are in the same boat there.
I don't know if I could rank them.
Okay.
I thought it was a great film. I look at it overall.
Okay, yeah. Good.
Yeah, I have a hard time ranking them.
So this film worked for you, start to finish, all the way through.
Start to finish, it worked.
Okay, true.
Yeah.
So I have a problem with judging a movie on a first viewing. I am one that really likes to sit with the film, view it a second time, and then make up my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I am not sure if this is a film that I'm super excited to see again. Part of me is like, yeah, I need to see this film again. And there's another part of me that's like, dude, you've seen it once. There's nothing more to see here. You've seen it all.
That's fair.
As soon as I left the theater, I was like, okay, I hate this movie. I'm not even interested in it. And I was talking to a coworker the next day, and I was like, hey, I went and saw it. I didn't like it. I want you to watch it and let me know. And he came back and he was like, I loved it. 5 out of 5. And I was like, what? And so we sat down and we talked together. And I went from totally hating it, being like, I don't like this at all, to more understanding, okay, this is what the story was. This is what it was trying to convey. I just think the way it conveyed it didn't work for me. And similar to you, I was like, well, maybe I should go again. But then I thought about it and I was like, I don't know if I can sit through it a second time. And I think for me, that was a sign of okay, I don't think I loved this movie. It had the elements of things I would like, but thinking of having to sit through it another time, I would get bored again.
There's a lot of symbolism in this film, and there's a lot of dream sequences that are strange. And so I feel like there's a lot here to interpret, and part of me feels like I missed it. I missed something. And so part of me wants to go back and see if I can figure out exactly what Luca is trying to tell me, what he's trying to communicate with me.
And I do think I'm going to rewatch it and do that. That's one of the reasons I love director David Lynch so much. These sequences felt like they were cut from a David Lynch film and thrown into this Luca film.
The mirror scene, right? And he's trying to figure out who he is to go through the mirror. And there's the snake eating itself on the floor. And then,
crying.
And crying. And you see, Eugene gets shot in the head, right?
Of course, this film is based on a book by William Burroughs, a semi-autobiographical novella that he wrote in 1985. William was a gay man, and he actually lived in Mexico working as an expat. And so a lot of this film is based on his experience.
Okay.
Did you know that he really shot his wife in the head and killed her playing that very game? And that's why it's in the film?
That's crazy.
Yeah, and he was charged for manslaughter.
That's intense.
Yeah,
that is intense.
Pretty crazy, huh? Pretty wild.
From what I've read online, it also seems like the book is very abstract and not very fleshed out itself, at least from what I've read. the book itself pivots and shifts pretty dramatically throughout it.
I've heard the book was always considered to be impossible to make as a film.
Interesting.
Wow.
Then we have the epilogue. We see William as an old man in his hotel room. How did you interpret this scene?
I loved the epilogue. Maybe that's my favorite part. It's really, really short, but you see William fall from the sky and he returns to this town he keeps going back to. His haircut's different. He looks just like Eugene, right? He's tried to clean up a little bit, but he walks into the same bar he's been walking into for who knows how many years. His same friend's still there. He's still getting robbed and they're still doing the same thing. And you hear the friend talk about how Eugene has disappeared 6 months ago. He went off as a tour guide and he hasn't heard of since. How I interpreted this scene, and especially what follows next of William dying on the bed alone with no one around him, is he just never was able to come to terms with himself. He could never grow as a person. He could never really connect with anyone, whereas Eugene did. At least my interpretation of it is that Eugene, maybe he went on this tour guide and he really connected with this tour guide, or maybe after that tour, he just said, I don't need to go back to that place. That town in Mexico was very bad to be in because it's just, you're repeating your same history over and over, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so even though William has a new look to him, it's the same guy. He's doing the same things. And so to me, that was almost however Eugene escaped, whether straight, whether gay, whatever, he escaped it. And he's living a life that's not going to repeat to the very end, because you see William, he dies alone in a room. There's no one else there. And he never got to experience that connection. He's so much so he's imagining this connection, right? At the very end, that someone would care about him enough to comfort him as he's dying, even though there's no one there.
Really cool way of him exploring their two different outcomes of this journey. William's trying to find some sort of escape that he's tried to find in heroin and other drugs. And Eugene's just kind of going to figure himself out. And William is so stuck on trying to figure out his path forward. He ends up just going back to the past, getting stuck in the past, even to the point of denial. But it's even more painful because you see this character of Eugene grow past this part of their lives, not go back, just keep moving forward. And William is willing to just stay behind and live in this delusion. Yeah, I love the ending scene.
I thought it was sad.
Yeah.
Sure. I thought it was very sad.
So the special effects in this film, some pretty cool, some really weird. There was the Star Wars-esque hologram to show William Lee's character's disassociation in the bar.
Yeah.
You guys remember that?
Yeah.
That did not work for me. I didn't love that so much. But I did think the layered, transparent ghost silhouette of William Lee's character.
When he's reaching for Eugene's face.
Yeah, when he reaches for Eugene and
or his back,
kind of his
reaching for his back.
fantasies.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool, especially...
Very creative.
Yeah, really creative.
I agree.
And in that theater scene, you brought it up briefly earlier, where they're watching the film and this man's looking in the mirror. And he says something along the lines of he's not happy with what he sees. And I think this was a really cool way of showing how Eugene felt. And as this scene is going on, William's having this fantasy with his transparent hand lifting up and touching the hair of Eugene's character. But this guy looking into the mirror and not being satisfied with what he sees, I think that perfectly illustrates the internal struggles of Eugene's character. He's kind of in this odd position where he doesn't feel like he identifies with the homosexual people. He doesn't really know where to go. And I think in this coming to terms with his own reflection, he hopes that he can just be gay. I think that's why he pushes this relationship so hard, why he tries for so long, because it would be easier to just associate with one group or at least have a place of belonging in society where it seems like it's split between two. I think this mirror in this scene is more a reflection of how society perceives him and him being unsatisfied with that. I mean, to oversimplify it a lot, I think he feels too straight for the gay people and too gay for the straight people, which is a really oversimplification, but a powerful scene nonetheless.
Well said.
I agree with that too. And I think Eugene seeing William, because William rides that fence, but almost proudly, right? Almost as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
You see him try so hard to interact with those couple straight guys right at the beginning of the movie, and they're talking about a boat and trying to convince him to go. And as soon as he walks away, the two guys are like, that guy's a loser. I I can't stand queer people, right? But then you see him 5 minutes later, he's sitting with his friend at the bar and they're talking and they're like, because they see the one Green Lantern guy and they're like, I hate those people, right? And they use a not nice word to describe them because they're so flamboyant and they're so gay, right? And so he rides this line proudly, right? And it goes back to that, I'm disembodied, I'm not queer.
Yeah.
Because he's so convinced he's not part of that group, but yet the straight group doesn't want him. They can't stand him. And so I think Eugene sees that in William. William's too blind to see it, but Eugene sees that. And so he's desperately trying to figure out where he can fall because he doesn't want to fall in so many different ways as William. He doesn't want to fall, but especially that like middle line of like, I don't know where I belong. I don't belong anywhere. No one wants to associate themselves with me.
Yeah.
Can I just say that Jason Schwartzman in this film was absolutely fantastic?
Yes, he was.
I did not see him in this movie playing that part.
No.
And he was one of my favorite characters in the film.
Yeah, I had no idea he was going to be in the film. When I saw him and he was this kind of overweight character, I was shocked.
Every time he was on screen, I was paying attention. I thought he was absolutely hilarious. But enough talk. I want to know exactly where it is you guys stand on this film. Let's go ahead and rate it.
I had a great time in this movie. It was definitely, it asks a lot of the viewer with how much it pivots from each act to the next. This film is definitely going to alienate a lot of the audience, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I'm feeling 4 stars.
There's always movies like this that are polarizing, right? That you either really connect to or you really don't. I've seen some movies like that where I've gone in, my friend's obsessed with it, I didn't get it, or I'll walk out and I'm obsessed and someone else doesn't get it. And I feel like this definitely is one of them. Like I said earlier, I feel like it had all the right ideas of a movie I would like. It had great music. It had great coloring, but I just couldn't connect to the characters. He drove me nuts. I gave it 2 stars, and I just don't think how it was shown, the way it was shown, was meant for me.
Very early on in the film, William Lee says, "It was a wise old queen who told me I have a duty to live, to conquer hate with knowledge and sincerity and love." And I loved that line of the film. And I wanted to feel that line of the film throughout its entirety. The film never comes back to that. I said earlier, I never really connected with William. The story's about William. After your thoughts, the things that you guys have shared, I feel like this movie would almost be better if it was focused on Eugene. I'm now more interested in Eugene's character than I've ever been, in his journey, in his experience, in his perceptions. I wish I got that in this film, and I didn't. However, there's a lot to love in this film. It's a beautiful film. Cinematically, the music is absolutely fantastic. I come in at 2.5. I think it's worth checking out if you're interested in this film. I wish I liked it more than I did, but that's where I fall. Go check it out for yourself and let us know what you think.
If you're interested in seeing another movie that shows a different take on being queer and lonely in your 30s or 40s, I would recommend All of Us Strangers. It was directed by Andrew High. It came out in 2023, and it stars Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal. I absolutely love this movie. It's one of my favorites, and I think it does a great job at telling a beautiful story between 2 very different people. If that sounds interesting to you at all, I would highly recommend it.
Thank you for listening to Faster Film Critic, and next on the pod, we discuss my most anticipated film of the year, Nosferatu by Robert Eggers. I cannot wait. You can also follow us on Letterboxd, Cinetrack, and Instagram. Email us at fasterfilmcritic@gmail.com. Hit us up with questions, comments, feedback, review requests, and please share this episode with your movie-loving friends.